If you didn't know.
¿Lee libros? Meaning, does Juan read books?
In conversation, however, we just need to raise the intonation at the end to express that it's a question. In writing, however, we have to include the question mark at the end, just like in English. But unlike English, questions in Spanish are marked with an inverted question mark at the beginning of the question as well.
Juan lee libros?
Another simple way we can turn a statement into a question is by adding a question tag at the end of a sentence. One question tag in English, for example, is right? Something something statement, right? It works in exactly the same way in Spanish.
Juan lee libros, no? Juan reads books, doesn't he?
The final way to make a sentence in Spanish is to actually switch the verb and the subject. So statements in Spanish would normally be SVO, but to formulate a question, it'll be VSO. The verb and subject are switched.
¿Lee Juan libros? Meaning, does Juan read books?
All of these questions mean the same thing, but they're not completely identical. There are tiny nuances that go along with the method you use to formulate a question.
The first and last examples appear to have exactly the same meaning, but Juan lee libros places a greater emphasis on Juan because the subject appears first in the sentence, as opposed to lee Juan libros, where the emphasis is on the verb.
As you can see, there are many ways to form basic questions in Spanish. In this lesson, you learned about the word order of Spanish, how to form affirmative and negative sentences, about the omission of the subject, and how to form questions. Hi, welcome to Introduction to Spanish. My name is Alicia, and I'm joined by...
Hi everyone, I'm Leah.
In this lesson, you'll learn the basics of Spanish writing. Just like English, Spanish uses Roman letters in its writing.
Unlike English, the Spanish alphabet has one additional letter called ñ, which appears after the letter N and before the letter O.
This letter looks like a regular N, but with a tilde on top. It sounds like a combination between an N and a Y sound, like in the word canyon.
Ñ, español, niño, mañana.
Other than this one extra letter, the Spanish alphabet is essentially written the same as the English alphabet. For the most part, punctuation in Spanish is similar to English. A period marks the end of a sentence, and a comma indicates a pause. Exclamation and question marks, however, are a different story. In English, we place an exclamation mark at the end of a sentence to denote that it's
Hola.
exclamatory. We do the same thing for question marks to denote that the sentence is a question.
In Spanish, however, exclamation marks and question marks must be placed at the end and at the beginning of the exclamatory phrase or question. Hola. Hola? The inverted marks must be placed whenever a new exclamatory or question phrase is formed, even if it is within the same sentence. Hola y buenas noches.
Notice how this
Hola
only
y
applies
buenas
to the
noches.
phrase and not to the entire sentence itself.
Juan, ¿a dónde vas?
On the other hand, the ending marks still go at the end of the sentence, regardless of whether the words are part of the question or not.
¿A dónde vas, Juan?
To indicate a
dónde
sentence
vas,
that is
Juan?
both a question and an exclamation, use both marks. Ensure that you're being consistent with which marks go on the inside and which go on the outside.
¿Y tú quién te crees que eres? ¿Y tú
¿Y tú quién te quieres? ¿Qui te crees que eres? ¿Y tú quién te crees que eres? ¿Crees que eres? ¿Crees que eres? ¿Crees que eres? ¿Crees que eres?
quién te crees que eres?
Compared to English, Spanish doesn't capitalize as many words as English does.
Let's go over a few cases where English capitalizes words when Spanish does not.
The days of the week and the months of the year are not capitalized in Spanish. For example,
Hoy es jueves 23 de octubre.
seasons of the year are also not capitalized.
El invierno se acerca.
Personal titles are not capitalized unless they are abbreviations.
Señor, señorita, doctor.
Titles, such as those of a movie or book, capitalize the first word only. Every other word in the title is written in lowercase.
Harry Potter y la piedra filosofal.
Names of countries and cities are capitalized, but names of languages are not.
Reino Unido. Estados Unidos. Hablo inglés.
Finally, we come to the Spanish accent mark. Spanish uses a mark called the acute accent. It looks like a diagonal line which starts from the bottom left and rises towards the upper right.
This accent mark appears above the letter. More specifically, accents will only appear over the 5 vowels in Spanish.
The Spanish accent is used to indicate that the syllable which has the accent must be stressed. So always stress the syllable which has the accent.
Médico. Compró.
Some words are spelled the same and sound the same, but have different meanings in Spanish.
Él. Él.
In these situations, the accent is used to differentiate the two words, so it's clear exactly which word we're referring to.
Más. Más.
Okay, so we've covered the main accent mark in Spanish, but what about these ones?
Don't be fooled by the first example. Even though it might look like an accent, it's
Ñ.
just the letter ñ in Spanish.
Enya.
The second example is an accent marker, and it's used to indicate that the U should be pronounced. This is because the letter U is usually silent when it comes after the letter G. Consider the following examples.
Guerra. Guerrilla. Vergüenza. Pingüino.
Guerrilla.
Notice how the U is silent in the first two examples,
Guerra. Guerrilla.
but pronounced in the last two.
Vergüenza. Pingüino.
Keep in mind, though, that this accent only occurs in a few words that have the letters G and U together. In this lesson, you learned that Spanish uses Roman letters like English, with one additional letter. Exclamation and question marks appear inverted at the beginning of the phrase and upright at the end of the sentence. Days, months, and seasons aren't capitalized in Spanish, and the acute accent is used in Spanish mainly to indicate stress. Hi, welcome to Introduction to Spanish. My name is Alicia, and I'm joined by...
Hi everyone, I'm Leah.
In this lesson, we'll
Hola,
focus
Leah.
on teaching you the most useful Spanish words and phrases for absolute beginners.
Make sure you're repeating the words out loud after I say the examples.
Are you ready?
course, Leah.
Let's get started.
Sí, Leah. Expressing thanks.
The best phrase to learn when studying a new language is one that expresses gratitude and appreciation. If you had to learn only a single phrase, this would be
Muchas
it.
gracias.
We taught
Muchas
you this
gracias.
phrase in the first lesson of this series. Do you remember what it was?
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. And it
Muchas
means
gracias.
thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Keep repeating after Leah until you get it.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Your turn.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. Damn, look how
Okay,
damn
one last
that
time.
is.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas.
A phrase you would often hear in response to muchas gracias or thank you very much is de nada. De nada.
De nada.
It literally means of nothing, but it's used to say you're welcome. De nada.
Your turn.
De nada.
De nada.
De nada.
Okay,
Muchas
one
gracias.
last time.
De nada.
De nada.
De nada.
Both muchas gracias and de nada are expressions often used by Spanish speakers.
The next phrase we'll teach you is perhaps the second most useful phrase of all. It's used to apologize or to excuse yourself.
Perdone.
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 Okay, your turn.
Perdone.
Perdone.
Perdone. Perdone.
Perdone.
Perdone.
One last time.
Perdone.
Perdone. Why does it kind of sound like
Perdone is the formal way to apologize or excuse yourself.
perdone?
To say it in a more casual way, it's perdona.
Perdone.
Perdona.
Perdone.
Your turn.
Perdone.
Perdona.
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 Perdone. Perdona.
One last time.
Perdone.
Perdona.
Perdona.
Now you can say thank you very much, excuse me, and I'm sorry in Spanish. Let's move on.
Perdona.
Asking where something is an incredibly important and useful phrase to learn. You're going to need this when asking where the bathroom, the train station, or where the hotel is. To
¿Dónde
do
es
so,
baño?
say,
¿Dónde
¿Dónde
baño?
está?
¿Dónde está
then add the
baño?
location.
¿Dónde está
Cuarto de baño.
Cuarto de baño. ¿Dónde está cuarto de baño? ¿Dónde está cuarto de baño? Where is the bathroom? Room of bath. Baño. Baño. ¿Dónde está el cuarto de baño? ¿Dónde está cuarto de baño?
¿Dónde está el cuarto de baño?
¿Dónde está el
¿Dónde
cuarto?
está el cuarto de baño?
¿Dónde está el cuarto
Repeat
de
after
baño?
Leah.
¿Dónde está el cuarto de baño?
Remember, if you
¿Dónde
want to
está
be a
el
bit
cuarto
more
de baño?
polite, you could add excuse me before the question.
Perdone, ¿dónde está el cuarto de baño?
Perdone, ¿dónde está el cuarto de baño? Perdón, ¿dónde está el cuarto de baño? Perdón. Perdón, ¿dónde está el cuarto de baño? It's like, damn, this man is formal. He's pronouncing every syllable of this sentence. Jesus. Perdón, perdone. Perdone, ¿dónde está el cuarto de baño? ¿Dónde está? Perdone. Perdone. ¿Dónde está el ¿Dónde está el cuarto de baño? Perdón. ¿Dónde está el cuarto de baño? Room of bath.
One last time.
Perdone, ¿dónde está el cuarto de baño?
Perdón, ¿dónde está el cuarto
For a
de baño?
hotel, it'd be
Perdone, ¿dónde hay un hotel?
¿Dónde hay un hotel?
For a hotel, it'd be
Perdone, ¿dónde hay un hotel?
For a hotel, it'd be
Perdone, ¿dónde hay un hotel?
¿Dónde hay un hotel?
Perdone, ¿dónde hay un hotel?
¿Dónde hay un hotel?
Have you noticed how the sentence
Perdone, ¿dónde hay un hotel?
vary slightly? If the thing you're looking for isn't specific, a hotel, we would use the articles un, unos, una, or unas. On the other hand, if it's specific, the hotel, then we would use el, la, los, or las instead. Perdone, ¿dónde hay un hotel? Perdone, ¿dónde está el hotel?
And remember to thank the person if they were helpful.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias.
In this final lesson, you learned how to say thank you, excuse me, I'm sorry, and to ask where something is in Spanish. And in
¿Dónde está? ¿Dónde hay un hotel? Where is a hotel? ¿Dónde un
In this series, we introduced you to the basics of Spanish pronunciation, grammar, writing, and more. Let's conclude with some parting advice from Leah and listen to some of her tips on how to learn Spanish from a native Spanish perspective.
Every day, I see a lot of learners struggling with Spanish verbs. My advice is to start with the simple form of the verb and then learn all the tenses. Only move on to compound verbs when you've mastered the simple form. By far, the biggest mistake that I see learners make is using the incorrect intonation. Intonation is very important in Spanish. The intonation is determined by stress, which in a lot of cases is actually marked by the accent marker. We go into great detail about this aspect of Spanish in our Ultimate Guide to Spanish Pronunciation video series. We'll link that at the end of the video. Get comfortable with stress patterns and accents in Spanish, and you'll avoid making this mistake. My last piece of advice is to watch contemporary videos, such as our videos here at SpanishPod101.com. This will ensure that you're learning real, applicable Spanish in the fastest and most effective way.
You've reached the end of this course, Introduction to Spanish, but it's only the beginning of your journey to Spanish fluency. Where do you go from here? Try our innovative Spanish culture series, where we teach you beginner vocab and even more useful phrases. Or check out any of our other video series. We have many different categories for you to choose from. Good luck as you continue learning Spanish, and I'll see you in another video. Bye!
Bye!
Bye.
Welcome to SpanishPod101.com's Español en 3 minutos, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn Spanish.
Leah.
Hola, soy Lucia. Mucho gusto. Hi, I'm Lucia. Nice to meet you. In this series, we're going to learn basic Spanish phrases. It's super easy and it only takes 3 minutes. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to introduce yourself in Spanish. You will be surprised at how easy it is. Are you ready?
Yeah, sure.
Listen again to my introduction. Hola, soy Lucia. Mucho gusto. Hi,
Hola, soy Lucia. Mucho gusto. Hola, soy Cody. Hola, soy Cody.
I'm Lucia. Nice to meet you.
Mucho gusto.
Hola, soy Lucia. Mucho gusto. The first word is hola, which means hi or hello. After
Hola,
that comes
soy
soy,
Cody.
which means I am. Hola, soy, and then your name. Hola, soy Lucia means hi, I'm Lucia. Finally,
Hola,
say
soy
mucho
Cody.
gusto, which means nice to meet you. So all together it is. Hola, soy Lucia. Mucho gusto. Hi, I'm Lucia. Nice to meet you.
Hola,
It's a
soy
polite
Cody.
and common way to greet someone. There is also
Mucho
another
gusto.
way to say your name. Instead of soy Lucia, you could say me llamo Lucia. Me llamo literally means I call myself. But
Me llamo Cody. Me llamo Cody. Me llamo Cody. Cody. Soy Cody.
We use it to mean my name is. Hola, me llamo Lucía. Mucho gusto. Hi,
Hola,
my name is
soy
Lucía.
Cody.
Nice to
Hola,
meet you.
Me llamo.
Hola, me llamo
Me
Lucía.
llamo.
Mucho
Hola.
gusto.
Hola, me llamo
Again,
Cody.
let's take a look at these two ways to introduce
Hola,
yourself.
me llamo Cody.
Hola, soy Lucía. Mucho gusto. Hi, I'm Lucía. Nice to meet you. Hola, me llamo Lucía. Mucho gusto. Hi, my name is Lucía. Nice to meet you. Now it's time for Lucia's Insights. People in Spanish-speaking countries greet each other by shaking hands. But depending on the situation, we often kiss each other on the cheek. So don't be surprised if this happens to you. In the last lesson, we learned how to introduce ourselves in Spanish. In this lesson, we're going to learn how to use good manners as we thank people. ¿Están listos? Are you ready? Empecemos. Let's start. There are several ways to thank someone. Let's start with the easiest. It's just one word. Gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias means
Gracias.
thank you. To say thank you very much,
Thank you.
you just need to
Gracias.
add muchas before it.
Muchas
Muchas
gracias.
means very or a lot. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias.
For a simple thanks, gracias will be enough. If you want to say more than just thanks, muchas gracias is good to use. Now, how do you respond to thank you in Spanish? It's easy. The most common way to say you're welcome is de nada. De nada.
De nada.
Nada means nothing. So, de nada literally means it's nothing. So we use it to mean you're welcome. So when
How do you say
someone
my
says
pleasure?
gracias to you, you can simply reply with de nada.
That's something I want to know. How to say my pleasure in Spanish. Mi placer.
Mi placer.
Mi placer. Mi placer.
Mi placer.
Bastards.
Use gracias or muchas gracias. Keeping it simple is always your safest bet. You don't have to worry about formal or informal situations. Gracias can be used with just about anyone, anywhere, and at any time. In the last lesson, we learned how to show thanks by saying gracias. In this lesson, we will learn some of the most common greetings used in Spanish. ¿Están listos? Are you ready? Empecemos. Let's start. The most used informal greeting is hola.
Hola.
Hola means hi or hello.
Hi.
We can use it in formal and informal situations at any time of day. It's very convenient. Hola.
Hola.
Now, let's look at some greetings that are
Hola.
used at certain times of day. First is good morning. Good morning in Spanish is buenos
Bien.
días.
Buenos
días.
Buenos
Buenos días
días.
literally means good day, but we
Buenos
use it to mean
días.
good morning.
Me
During
llamo
the day,
Cody.
we say buenas tardes.
Soy
Buenas tardes. Buenas tardes means good
Hola.
afternoon.
Soy
This can be
Cody.
used all day as long as it's light outside. Again, buenas tardes. When it starts to get dark,
tardes.
you can switch to this. Buenas noches. Buenas noches. Buenas noches means good evening or good night, depending on the situation. If you're greeting someone in the evening, it means good evening. If you're speaking to someone before you go to sleep, it means good night. Again, that's buenas noches. Now, you can greet people in many different ways
Buenos
in
noches.
Spanish. Let's review them all again. As a general greeting, hola. In the morning,
Hola.
buenos días.
Buenos días.
In the afternoon or
Buenas
during the day,
tardes.
buenas tardes. In the
Buenas
evening or at
tardes.
night, buenas noches.
Buenas
Pretty easy,
noches.
right? Now it's time for Lucia's insights. If you're not sure which greeting is right to use, buenos días, buenas tardes, or buenas noches, just
Buenas
remember
tardes.
that all can be used at any time of day. In the last lesson, we learned the most common greeting in Spanish. Do you remember them?
Hola.
In this lesson, we're going to learn a very useful phrase. Do you speak English? If you're in a situation where you need help in English, this phrase can be a lifesaver. Here is a formal way to say it. ¿Habla inglés? ¿Habla inglés?
Habla
Again, this means,
inglés.
do you speak English? The word habla is a form of the verb hablar,
Habla
which means
inglés.
to speak. This is the formal way to say you speak.
Habla
Hablar
inglés.
is known as a AR verb because it ends in AR. Most AR verbs conjugate in a similar way. To learn how to properly conjugate AR verbs like hablar, please check out our Absolute Beginner series on SpanishPod101.com. Now, let's make this sentence informal. This is done by adding an S to the end of habla. When we do that, we get hablas.
Hablas
All
inglés.
together, hablas inglés, hablas inglés. This is the informal way to ask, do you speak English? The responses you receive could be one of these three. Sí, hablo inglés. Yes,
Sí,
I speak
habla
English.
inglés.
Sí, hablo
That's very good.
inglés. Sí, hablo un poco. Yes, I speak a little.
Sí, habla un poco. Sí, habla un poco. Sí, habla un poco. Sí, habla un poco. Sí, habla un poco.
Sí, hablo un poco.
Hablo.
No hablo
No,
inglés.
No habla
No,
inglés.
I don't speak English. No hablo inglés. In all of this, hablo means I speak. In the last one, we have no hablo, which is the negative form. It means I don't speak. Now it's time for Lucia's insights. If you want to ask about a different language, just change the word inglés. Here are some language names to get you started. Italiano for Italian. Ruso for Russian. Francés for French. Alemán for German.
Alemán.
In the last lesson, we learned the phrase habla inglés. Do you speak English? In this lesson, we're going to learn how to apologize or say excuse me in Spanish. The basic phrase for excuse me is disculpe. Disculpe. We should use disculpe in formal situations, like when we're ordering something at a restaurant. For example, disculpe, un café por favor.
Disculpe. Un café por Un café por favor. Disculpe. Un café por favor.
Excuse me, a coffee please. We can also use it when asking a question. Disculpe, ¿dónde está el
What
baño?
about perdone? ¿Dónde está el baño? Perdone. Perdono. Disculpe. Disculpe. ¿Dónde está el perdón? Perdone. ¿Dónde está el perdón? ¿Dónde está el baño? Muy malo. Sí, un hablo poco.
Excuse me, where is the restroom? Another way to say excuse me is perdón.
Perdón. Disculpe.
Another way to
Disculpe. Perdón. Disculpe. Disculpe. Perdón. Disculpe. Perdón. Disculpe. Perdón.
say excuse me is perdón. Perdón. Just like disculpe, we can use perdón when asking a question or when apologizing. Both of these phrases can be used for either excuse me or I'm sorry. But if you really want to apologize for something, it might be better to use a different phrase. That phrase is lo siento. It means I'm sorry, and it can be used in both formal and informal situations.
Lo siento.
Lo siento. Unlike the others, lo siento only has the meaning of I'm sorry and not excuse me. Now it's time for Lucia's insights. Please remember that if we accidentally bump into someone on the street, we don't usually say I'm sorry, lo siento. Instead, we say excuse me, disculpe, or perdón. Are you able to count in Spanish? In the next lesson, we're going to learn the numbers in Spanish from 1 to 10. Hasta la próxima. See you soon.
Hi everyone. Welcome to the Ultimate Spanish Pronunciation Guide.
7, 8, 9, 10.
In this series, you'll master Spanish pronunciation. Proper pronunciation is essential in Spanish, and in this series, you'll learn it in a fast, comprehensive, and easy way. In this first lesson, you'll learn about the building blocks of the
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I forgot 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Triente, uno, 31.
Spanish pronunciation system that will help you in future lessons. The letters used in Spanish are the same as the letters you use in English, with the exception of one other letter, and these letters, with accents over them. But be careful not to fall into a very common trap. As you're learning to speak correctly, you shouldn't concern yourself with all the letters. That's right, forget them. You care about the sounds of Spanish, and here they are. There are 27 consonant sounds and 5 vowel sounds. Each symbol that you see here represents a single sound determined by the IPA, which is a standardized way to represent sounds without the accompanying baggage that's often involved with traditional letters. By using these 32 sounds, you can form every single word in Spanish. Still seem complicated? Well, how about this? Of the 27 consonant sounds in Spanish, you already know 18 of them. That's right. If you're a native English speaker, then you already make these sounds every day. We'll cover familiar sounds in lessons 4 and 5. You can also ignore 2 of the vowel sounds for the same reason. The only thing standing between you and perfect Spanish pronunciation are 9 new consonant and 3 new vowel sounds. You can handle that. Now let me introduce Alex, who will be helping you to master these new sounds.
Hola, soy Alex.
Alex will be giving you native
Hola,
pronunciation
soy
examples for
Cody.
you to imitate. But for this first lesson, just sit back and listen to the unique sounds of Spanish.
Obtuso. Trigo.
Obtuso. Trigo. Obtuso. Trigo. So, what does it look like whenever I type in Cody's story? Ah. It's cool.
Pollo.
Oye. Coñón.
Cañón.
Cañón. Cañón. Cañón. Perdone. ¿Dónde está? Cuatro baños. Perdone. ¿Dónde está? Hola. Me llamo Cody. Ooh, coffee's ready. Ooh, coffee's ready. This is Barrows first. I've been 20 runs dry. Maybe there'll be something. £50 in 6 months without loose skin. Just have to use Trend.
Wait, that's not the start. I can't be started like that. Okay, okay.
Yes.
You go. How do I stop? Oh my god.
Just like that.
Let's go. Okay, what's next? I'm literally crying right now.
You're not gonna be able to bend.
Like go.
Yes. Go.
That's my terminology.
Grab it.
Get it. Yeah.
Climb up.
Up here. Right here.
Oh, you're just flying up.
You are flying up. You can go straight to. Yeah, look at that. That was dope.
Okay, I was trying on that one. Oh god. Wait, that's not the start. I can't be started like that. Okay, okay.
Yes.
You go. How do I stop? Oh my god.
Just like that.
Let's go. Okay, what's next? I'm literally crying right now.
You're not gonna be able to bend.
Like go.
Yes. Go. 。
Oh
cousins.
Any move can be the last you make. In a war of the mind, you must adapt to change. Every mistake made, an opportunity to strike. Check. And when the ashes settle, only one will be crowned the victor.
Checkmate.
Victory. Oh, Jesus Christ!
That's right! I'm doing the first ever chess boxing event, including a new sport, smash boxing, the Mogul Chess Boxing Championship. I think this shit is going to be the biggest stream I've ever done. I've been working on this event for the past, like, 6 months, I think.
Yo, Jonathan here. It's been a minute. It's been a long 4 weeks, and I didn't want to make this video at the low point of everything. Typically, if I'm sick or something's not right or I'm not feeling great, I'd much rather not talk about it, put my head down and push through and move on to the next. But in this case, things just got a little more serious. In no way, shape, or form is this meant to be a poor me video or anything like that. More so for anyone that's reached out, for those who are asking, hey, where's the iPhone 14 coverage? For brands, it's more of a, hey, this is what happened and why it's been radio silent. The condensed version is I've been dealing with shingles for the past month plus, and I thought it seemed like I caught it early enough and had it on my head and above my eye and on my face, but I was able to get on antivirals for about 2 weeks, and things seemed like they were on the mend and heading in the right direction, and then kind of just took a twist. The Friday before Labor Day, I noticed some blur in my eye and didn't really think too much of it. It was kind of there Saturday as well, but then Sunday, the day before Labor Day, I woke up and it was just like straight blur, like someone slapped Vaseline over my entire right eye, which freaked me out. To make things more challenging, the day before Labor Day made things just tremendously harder trying to get in touch or to get seen by anybody. Fortunately, I was able to find an eye doctor and get in and get checked out, but the initial diagnosis was pretty grim. It was pretty much just a straight, you have a pretty substantial defect over the middle of your cornea, which is probably causing that blur. So internally, I'm freaking out thinking why, how, things were fine a few days ago. And I think the more terrifying part was the assessment that there's a good chance that you're just gonna have to live with this forever. So I think that kind of just shook me upside down for a minute, and I think the uncertainty was probably the scariest part, to where it's not like, hey, something's wrong if you do this, or if you wait this long, things are gonna get better. It was just such a, this is how it is, and there's a really good chance that it's gonna stay this way. The silver lining of that day, I think, was being able to get that additional dose of antivirals, and in this case, an antiviral gel for the eye, because the nightmare point beyond just all that already is that things could get even worse. Ultimately, what ended up happening is shingles got into the eye and ended up creating a lesion or wound that was multiple layers deep into the cornea. So the first uphill battle was, one, just trying to get things to even start healing. The tricky part there is healing also means scarring, which is what we don't want in this case, because if it scars over, that's where you run into the risk of having to deal with it for the rest of your life. I think the toughest part of this is just the mental aspect, because one, it's something that is just constantly present in your everyday, every second of every waking moment, to where it's just there front and center and you can't escape it. And then at the same time, it's like you're not supposed to.
So now that we've had 24 hours to digest everything that Apple announced and released during their Far Out event, and the Apple hangover is now over, for lack of a better term, we can now talk about the actual iPhone 14 and why I personally think that this iPhone 14 lineup is actually one to skip. So without further ado, here are 5 reasons why I think you should actually forego the iPhone 14 lineup and maybe wait for that iPhone 15, or go with another phone for that matter. Let's talk about it. So reason number one has to be the chipset that Apple decided to put in both the iPhone 14 and the iPhone 14 Pro lineup. So with the iPhone 14s, we're actually keeping the same A15 Bionic that are on all the iPhone 13s and 13 Pros. So we're getting a 1-year-old chip in iPhones that are supposedly going to be new in the iPhone 14 lineup. And apparently Apple is saying they're going to get an 18% boost in CPU and GPU power. But again, it's still the same A15 Bionic chip on the iPhone 14 and the iPhone 14 Plus. And then the A16 Bionic chip that's going to be in the 14 Pro and the 14 Pro Max, you know, leaves some things to be desired still, right? It is that 4nm process, so they were able to fit a little bit more in there, and they do promise up to 40% extra GPU and CPU power, but that's the key word. It's up to 40%. And we're gonna have to wait to see and get those iPhones in the studio to see if we see any real world difference, because yes, the Geekbench scores do show that the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max will be more powerful, but Geekbench scores aren't the best way to really show you guys how an iPhone, or how a phone for that matter, will react and will perform on a day-to-day basis. Reason number two has to be the lack of innovation on the iPhone 14 models. So as we saw, Apple completely got rid of the mini in the iPhone 14 lineup, and we went with the regular iPhone 14 at 6.1 inches and then the iPhone 14 Plus at 6.7 inches. And these phones look identical to the ones from the 13, and also they look identical to the 12s. So there's literally no innovation on the front side, back side, on the rails. Aside from a new colorway and that new blue color for the iPhone 14 and 14 Plus, there is nothing visually different about the iPhone compared to the 13. And then compared to the 12, the only thing that's different is the actual way that the cameras are orientated. So instead of being diagonal, they're just right over each other like they were on the 11 and the 10 and the 10s. So from a visual standpoint, the iPhone 14s, no real visual difference compared to last year's and a 2-year-old model for that matter. Reason number three, we're going to talk about this category in terms of niche upgrades, because Apple, they spent, about 40 minutes talking about the new iPhones and all the new features from a hardware and a software perspective. And honestly, it looked really cool in the moment, right? We had this new satellite feature, so you could literally never get lost no matter what situation you're in. We have the crash detection feature, which is going to be amazing when you are in a car accident, God forbid something does happen, and that does come in handy. And then there were other little things like action mode inside of the new cameras. Then also, of course, the island, the dynamic island that was added to the 14 Pro and Pro Max. But the reason I'm putting this in a negative space is because these are all very niche situations. So unless you are that hiker, unless you are that person that goes off the grid a lot, because I am not one of those people, I am on the grid pretty much 100% of the time, and I know that a lot of people are. So that satellite feature, A, is going to be a very niche use case situation, which most people aren't going to want to use, because if you are in that situation, then it's probably not a good thing to be in. But then also, two, it's kind of like SOS as a service. In the fine print, Apple did state that this is going to be a service provided by Apple. So you get it 2 years for free with any iPhone 14 and 14 Pro purchase, but then after that, there's going to be a cost associated with that. And I promise you it's not going to be cheap, because think about what that service is providing. Like if you're out in the wilderness, in the remote world, in a forest, in a desert, in a situation where there's no data and no cell signal, then you're gonna have to get a satellite signal to get some sort of chopper or like four-wheeler or some sort of emergency services to get to that point, which is not going to be cheap. So having this as a service is going to be relatively expensive in my opinion. This is not gonna be a $4.99 or $9.99 subscription model. Maybe Apple will bundle it into some sort of like wilderness package inside of Apple One, but overall, I think, mark my words, this is gonna be like $100 a month kind of subscription service if you wanna have this turned on. So that's what I mean when it comes to niche upgrades, right? The crash detection, of course, it's a great feature, but again, hopefully you don't have to be in that situation. And already most Apple Watches from the Series 5 and up will be able to detect a hard fall or a hard crash, even though it isn't labeled as crash detection. So keep that in mind when it comes to these niche upgrades. Yes, Apple did provide some cool kind of cinematography and some cool ads to really make you feel like you needed this in order to quote unquote stay alive. But overall, these are very niche upgrades. And then when it comes to the dynamic island, yes, it's a beautiful thing to see, especially how well Apple is adapting all the different notification styles inside of that island and the way that they're using it. But again, every iPhone that supports iOS 16 is still going to be able to have those live notifications on the bottom of the screen. We're still going to be able to functionally see all of our notifications in real time. So this is not really a function, it's more of a form thing. So if you like how pretty it looks, then by all means, jump on it, go to the dynamic island, plant your flag there and enjoy it. But from a function standpoint, you're not really going to get much more compared to any other iPhone that's running iOS 16. The next category is going to be the eSIM and then the lightning cable. So I want to put this in the same category because it involves kind of like ports and the removal of ports on the outside of the iPhone. So in the US, and this is only for the US, Apple's iPhone 14 lineup, the entire lineup is going to come with eSIM only, which means you cannot remove the SIM card. There's no physical SIM card. So if you're somebody that swaps between 18 phones a year and you use the same SIM card, that's going to be it, right? Good luck being able to switch between eSIMs and between carriers and going from a phone that's eSIM to a phone that has a regular SIM card. It's going to be a tough one, especially for people that buy the iPhone 14 to then return it because they want to try it out for a week or two. It's going to be a little bit different when it comes to carriers because you're going to have to upgrade to an eSIM, and then if you want to return the phone, you're going to have to downgrade and get a physical SIM card again to put inside of an iPhone 13 or whatever you were using before. So eSIM only is kind of weird to me, but again, it's only US based. If you are buying it anywhere else in the world, it will have a SIM card tray, so keep that in mind. And then also to talk about the lightning cable, with the iPhone 15, we're supposed to be getting a USB-C cable and a USB-C port and foregoing the lightning cable. So those are all big negatives because if we wait another 12 months, Apple's going to have to either totally remove the lightning port or add USB-C. So keep that in mind when trying to purchase the iPhone 14s. And then the final reason as to why I think we should actually skip this iPhone 14 altogether is now that the iPhone 14 and 14 Pros are out, the price reduction on the rest of the iPhone lineup is actually amazing. So now the iPhone lineup looks a little bit like this. You have the iPhone SE sitting at $429 with the A15 Bionic chip in there. So everything is going to work very, very quickly. Sure, the battery life isn't great. You know, the hardware isn't amazing. But if you just want an iPhone that works and works well with all the peripherals that Apple includes, that is going to be your cheapest entry point if you want to go with a brand new phone. But then they're also still selling the iPhone 12 for $599. And then they're also still selling the 13 mini, the 13, and then we get into the 14 lineup. So in my opinion, I think the best purchase is actually a regular iPhone 13, just because the battery life upgrades were substantial compared to the 12. But if you want to get the same form factor with the same cool design, the same railings, and you want to go as cheap as possible, the iPhone 12 is sitting pretty at $599, and I think you can get that if you spread it out over 2 years for $12 a month, even less. So I think that is a much better purchase because from a camera standpoint, cameras are still 90% of the way there. Battery life isn't amazing on those phones, so keep that in mind, but you still get MagSafe, you still get the new design, you get the cool colorway, so it all works pretty well from an iPhone 12 lineup, and it looks great, and overall you would be very, very happy, especially if you're coming from an iPhone 6 or iPhone 8 or something a little bit older. So that is my final reason, right? It's the price reduction just from a retail standpoint. Now, I'm not even talking about the secondary market, the refurbished market. Like, you probably pick up iPhone 10s and iPhone 11s for even cheaper, iPhone XRs. And I do believe that the iPhone XR will replace the iPhone SE at some point. So the new iPhone SE will be an iPhone XR body, but that's not coming until later down the line. But keep that in mind, that Apple now has a bunch of phones at a bunch of different price points where you don't need to get an iPhone 14 Pro. So you know who you are if you need the iPhone 14s and the 14 Pros, and you need the features that come with those phones. But for the most part, for 99% of people, go with a cheaper iPhone, go with something like the iPhone 12, the iPhone 13, even the 13 mini is a great price because it still has the A15 Bionic and it starts at $599. Sure, battery life isn't amazing, but for an iPhone with all that power to be able to run everything that you want to run on it, be your mobile photography station and everything like that, the iPhone 13 mini is a great purchase. And get them while you still can, because after that falls off the lineup, that'll be the last mini phone Apple provides. But those are my 5 reasons to avoid the iPhone 14. You know, there's a price barrier that's kind of expensive. It feels like Apple's kind of making you go to the iPhone 14 Pro route if you want to get any new features. So get yourself an older iPhone if you do want to get something new, because again, those are still directly from Apple. But that being said, we still will be getting the iPhone 14 and the 14 Pros in the studio to test out, compare it to last year's model, compare it to the 12s, and see if it is actually worth your money. Because again, the 14 Pro Max starts at $1,100 for 128 gigs. And if you want to go to a terabyte, you're almost spending $2,000 on a cell phone. And I know most people aren't upgrading every year, but if right now there is no real justification to go from the 13 Pro to the 14 Pro unless you're looking at strictly aesthetics and that dynamic island. But that's gonna do it for this video. If you guys did make it to the end, leave a little dolphin in the comments down below. And then also leave a comment down below which iPhone you have, where are you coming from? Are you gonna upgrade to these 14s? Are you gonna wait for the 15 to come out with USB-C? Always curious to know what your situation is. And also, Apple's probably gonna have an event in October releasing iPads and Macs. So keep that in mind if you're trying to save up some money for some new Apple products. But that's gonna do it. If you guys do wanna watch some more videos of iPhone 14, Apple Watch Ultra, and AirPods 2, click on one of these videos right here. But I'm Fernando, and I'm out of here. Peace.
turns out there's a lot of iPhones. And no matter what you think about the iPhone, the first iPhone, this guy right here, the original, it's pretty legendary. It was unveiled at Macworld 2007. It was shown off in a glass case. It had that memorable Steve Jobs moment on stage, an iPod, a phone, a breakthrough internet communicator. These aren't all 3 separate devices, this is one device. It was pretty clear Apple had something pretty special on their hands at that moment, and you can mark that day on the calendar as a pretty obvious inflection point towards getting to where smartphones are today. Now today, we're all the way up to iPhone 13. Lucky 13. And actually the 13 is a lineup of phones. It's a bunch of phones. And they all have world-class cameras, lots of proprietary silicon, way more software features, and it's a tightly packed collection of parts that would have been basically impossible back in 2007. So clearly a lot has happened since then. So today, I've got every single iPhone that's ever been released, 1 through 13, and I'm gonna review them all. Now, some of them I've seen before, some of them I've never even touched or held. It's the first time I've ever gotten them in the studio, and now they're working. So I just wanted to look back and see how far these phones have come, and it's actually pretty incredible when you put them all next to each other. So join me. Also, stay tuned for the graphs at the end. We got some good graphs. So January 9th, 2007, the first iPhone. So here's a fun fact. There's an article from The Guardian that shows that apparently 6 out of 10 Americans knew that an iPhone was coming before it was officially unveiled. So this was an incredibly hyped thing, but it came out, and when it finally did, it was immediately pretty recognizable. You've got this 2-tone design, metal up top, plastic at the bottom for all the antenna pass through, a very recessed headphone jack that actually prevented lots of non-Apple headphones from working with it. And this thing here really set the tone for the rounded corners, the flat front, and the general UI of completely depending on a multi-touch screen for everything, including a virtual keyboard, which was pretty bold at the time. Now, it had a bunch of things missing. So it had no app store on it when it launched. So basically you could use the included apps and that's it. And there were some good ones, you know, Safari's here, there was a YouTube app, Google Maps was included, there's a stock and weather app, but you couldn't get anything else. You also couldn't even set a wallpaper. Every single non-jailbroken original iPhone was rocking the same wallpaper. Absolutely nothing, pitch black. All these numbers too are pretty hilarious, but let's just put them out there for context. 3.5-inch display, 2 megapixel camera on the back. It launched with a 4 or 8 gigabyte storage version, and the starting price was $499, which was pretty expensive for a phone. It's one of the most recognizable phones ever. It's the only one that had a SIM card tray at the top. It's the only 2-tone iPhone they ever made. And fun fact, this launched it was announced in January, but then it didn't actually launch until 5 months later, in June basically. And then, not till another 8 months later did they drop a 16 gig version. But you know, looking back, even though it obviously had a lot objectively wrong with it and a bunch of things missing about it, there was clearly a lot about the original iPhone that stood out, that was better than what was out on the market, and that's why it had such an impact. But there was a sequel, and that sequel was the iPhone 3G. So this was called the 3G, not the iPhone 2, because it was the first one using a 3G network instead of Edge, and there were some big changes. First of all, it does feel a lot more like a refined version of the original iPhone, actually. It's all black plastic now, just smooth, like a pebble, mainly because it's way more tapered, so it actually feels and looks thinner, but that actually does lose you some space on the inside, so the battery in this phone is actually smaller than the original iPhone. The volume rocker and the iconic mute switch that are already here kind of blend into the side now though, but software-wise, this was another big step. Originally, there were no plans for an app store, like I said. First one didn't have it. Steve Jobs said everyone should make web apps for Safari, but they changed course and reconsidered, so this phone launched with the App Store, which started with 500 apps in it, and we all know how that skyrocketed from there. So this is iPhone OS 2 on the iPhone 3G. Then we got the iPhone 3GS, the first ever S update. S here, we could safely assume, is for speed, but also you could say it stands for silver because really the only difference on the outside is the text on the back of the phone goes from gray to reflective silver. Other than that, this phone's the exact same design and dimensions. You could fit the same cases as the 3G, but the internals all got upgraded. So it's a faster chip made by Samsung that is literally twice as fast. Toss in 256 megabytes of RAM and a 3 megapixel camera and a slightly larger battery, you got yourself an S update. But looking back at it today, I could also argue the S stood for software because it got some pretty big features again. iPhone OS 3 finally added cut, copy, and paste, finally. And believe it or not, this was the first year the iPhone could actually record videos in the camera app, along with autofocus and auto white balance. I also noticed the vibration motor got a lot better on the 3GS. It's a little smoother and less rattly than the first two. Now, this is also the first iPhone that had a major gate attached to it. So there was a white version of the 3GS, and it started having weird discoloration issues, turned out to be because of heat. So Apple ended up just recommending that people not leave their phone in a car for a long time in the sun, or not use their phone for an extended period of time on a hot day. Not ideal, kind of a classic Apple response, but turned out to be fine. So iPhone 4, I think I can safely say, was their best new design, and maybe their best design ever. It was hyped into oblivion from that famous Gizmodo leak before launch, but it eventually was revealed, and we still see shades of this iPhone in today's iPhones. So first of all, it only launched in one color, black. They had to make a special white version later. But it's got the new square design that at the time on stage was called the thinnest smartphone on the planet at 9.4 millimeters. And there were a couple others that were a little thinner, but more importantly, it's all flat sides now on all the sides. All right, what's up? MKBHD here. Welcome to the first PC that I have built in, I have to look this up, 9 years. So I've made a lot of videos about computers and we've had pre-built PCs in here, but I've never actually built one from scratch since 2013, which if you look back was actually a Hackintosh, but we don't talk about that. I'm gonna be doing this again with a bunch of parts here, and I've decided I'm only going to be using YouTuber merch here to build it. So I've got the desk mat here, mkbhd.com. I've got a knife because we got some unboxings to do. This is the Jerry Rig Everything knife. You've probably heard of it. It's pretty sweet. It's actually the sharpest knife I own. And then we have this video's sponsor. Yes, actually, the Linus Tech Tips screwdriver, both in the Creator Edition and the Regular Edition. But shout out to Linus and the team who have been working on this for apparently 3+ years to put this together, which is pretty sweet. So let's take a look at this one. Let's unbox the screwdriver. Oh, got the nice Linus orange colors in here, so there it is. Feels very solid, and you've probably got some bits in here. So it comes with all 12 of these bits here, and you can store all 12 of those bits up here in the top. That's really satisfying, nice. Yeah, this is made in partnership with Mega Pro Tools, who has tons of experience making tools like this, and there's a magnet in the shaft, so if you have trouble like grabbing a screw, that should be no problem. I'm probably gonna use the Phillips a lot. I'm just gonna preload that. Oh, I forgot to mention, we are gonna be doing a quick giveaway. Stay tuned to the end for a little bit of details, but this is a Creator Edition of the screwdriver, and the only thing that means for me is it's red and black, which is a special little bit of a colorway. So you got the Stealth Matte Black version, and you've got a red and black version. I'm gonna give these away again. We'll talk about it at the end. Actually, for this video, I'm going to build this PC with the red screwdriver to be that much more special. So when I give it away, you'll have a one of one that built this PC. But hey, if you want to get one of these in the standard colors yourself, you can. You can go to lttstore.com and pre-order yours today. So I've got all the parts over here. Let's just go through them one by one. All right, so first up, we've got the case. This is Corsair's 4000X. It's a mid-tower PC case and it's pretty simple. It's 130 bucks. It's got some fans in the front, tempered glass, rectangle, nothing crazy. It's just gonna be a standard high-end PC build. Then next up, I think it's important to introduce the motherboard and the CPU we're using. This is an Asus ProArt Z690. You can see a pretty sweet black and gold box here, which is using Intel's 12th gen chip here, Intel Core i9. So we're gonna pop that in there. And I'll go over all the details as we start to install them, but I'm just gonna give you the quick run through. The all-in-one liquid cooler for the CPU. It's Corsair's H150i. It's got a bunch of fans, and it's really solid. We'll get to that when we install it. Then I also have here our RAM, 64 gigs of RAM from G.Skill, and also a bunch of M.2 SSDs. They're very fast. We've got 2 4 terabytes and 2 2 terabytes. Yes, the board has enough to support it, and I'll install them all in front of your very eyes. And then last but not least here is, we'll get to that. This is our power supply. So Asus 1200 watt modular power supply and a bunch of our cables here. Modular power supply means, of course, we're picking our cables. And our GPU might look a little bit different. As you can see, that's an Intel Arc A770. We've talked about NVIDIA and AMD in the past. This is a little bit of a different option, but I think we'll start with the motherboard. This is our board. This is Asus's new ProArt motherboard. This comes with 3 months of Adobe's Creative Cloud for free, so you can kind of get a sense of who they're aiming at with this board. All right, wow. It's got some heft to it. It's a very solid board. I want to put together as much of the computer as possible on the board here in front of me before I try to put it in the case. So I'm gonna put the CPU in, I'm gonna put the RAM in, I'm gonna put the SSDs in, and then we'll see about the cooler, how much I can do before I actually have to start cable managing and putting it in the case. All right, so here is our CPU. This is Intel's Core i9 12900K. I haven't seen CPU packaging in a while, and this is definitely much fancier than I remember. So that's pretty cool. Twist to open. This is the fanciest. Very nice. Very nice. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a CPU in a plastic case, but you know, this is nice presentation. So I'm gonna not even take it out yet, but I'm gonna open this latch here, and this will open. I'm gonna line up that arrow we see on the bottom corner with the arrow that I saw here on the bottom left corner. I'm just gonna place that down right there. So then I'm gonna push this cover down, push this down, and our cover pops off, and our CPU is installed. All right, I'm gonna do RAM next. I think the RAM is probably some of the best looking stuff in the inside of a PC, especially if it has lights on it, which this one does. So we've got 2 sticks of memory here. These are 2 32 gig DDR5 memory sticks. And you could go double it up in the future. I only have 4 slots on this board, but that's fine. And I'm gonna make sure I install dual channel memory in the appropriate slots on the board here. It's a good crunchy sound when you do it right. Beautiful. We've got our SSDs, our incredibly fast M2 SSDs. And on this board, we have our PCI slots, but then under these, we have our M2 ports. I'm gonna just use a screwdriver and pop these open. What should I use here? I'm gonna go flathead to unscrew these. So there's the first M2 slot. If you told somebody in 2013 when I last built a PC that you could get a 4 terabyte drive in the palm of your hand, they would not have believed you. I would not have believed you. Trying to tell me that is 4 terabytes. Those pins connected. They are seated, cool. And then I'm just gonna push this down to the screw here and then use that to lock it in place. That's actually super easy. All right, so we've got a bunch more. I actually don't need all of these drives, but I'm gonna install some more anyway. So this is the bottom, this is the last 2 M2 PCIe 4.0 slots. I assume they're next to each other. So actually what's interesting now is these drives have their own heat sinks in their little covers, as you can tell. So my job now is to peel off this cover and pop the heatsink back on, and that'll be good for the drives. I'm gonna take this, move it to the side, and start working on the case. I'm gonna go power supply, and then we'll go from there. I'm gonna save this peel for when it's done. That'll be my reward. So okay, with the door off, and we can see what sort of a canvas we have to work with. It's got 3 fans here, space for the power supply down here. This is a hard drive bracket, but we don't have hard drives in this build. We have literally terabytes of SSD. So I think I should just be able to take that out. Yeah, matter of fact, let's take that out. So let's come from the back, take this other panel off, and make space for the power supply. But let's take this bracket out the way. Oh, thumb screws. I thought I was gonna have to use a screwdriver again. Actually, ooh, that's pretty tight. There we go. Okay. This is the part where it gets fun, because it's been a long time, like I said, since I've built a PC. Power supply. Yep, solid metal. All the ROG stuff is so consistently ROG. Like the ROG phone looks like the ROG monitor, which looks like the ROG power supply, which looks like the ROG graphics cards. I mean, these things are consistent. So as a modular power supply, it of course comes with a box of cables. I'm not going to be using any of these, but it does have your main power cables and all that good stuff, but we're using some cable mod cables, as you already saw. I also just noticed this, just like the ROG phone, there is a screen on this power supply. But the thing about this screen and this case is it's going to be sitting in there blocked by the door, so you're not actually going to be able to see it, but that would just show you, I guess, the amount of watts of power you're drawing. So these are the cables we're going to be using with this power supply. Cable Mod Pro Series cable kit. So the last time I built a PC, I definitely just used the included cables with the modular power supply. These look way better, nice. And these are specifically matching, these are for this power supply, which is sweet. There's a little air intake at the bottom, so we know the orientation of the power supply in the case, which will be like that. and then all the cables will come into the case and be routed up the back through here. So let's start by attaching them. Okay, so this is actually kind of nice. It's labeled right here. So these two are for the motherboard. This is gonna go here, which means this is gonna go here. Fan down, oriented correctly. Let's line her up. All right, so now that we've got the cables in the power supply in the case, I'm just gonna check to make sure all of our parts fit. Swivel this around so you can check with me. So the board's obviously got its spot up here. It's going to be oriented that way. I'm also gonna double check this CPU cooler. It's pretty, I don't know, it's pretty big. We'll see if it fits in this case. And I'm hoping, oh. This is a 3-fan, 3x120, it's a 360 mil radiator. This case is not designed to fit those, it'll only fit a 240. We're gonna get a little bit creative with this one. Since there are 3 fans in the front, that's still big enough for a 360, so I'm gonna replace the 3 front fans with this radiator. Should still work. I'm gonna have to take fans out, take the front off. It's a little bit extra fun. This is what PC building is all about. Unfortunately, we'll have to put the tubes at the top to get it to actually fit and connect. You're not supposed to do that, but I don't know, LTT spec'd this build with this exact config, so I'm gonna make the best of it. Luckily, I have my handy LTT screwdriver, which makes this all super easy. So now I'm gonna put these fans into this radiator. Typically don't want to put the cables or the tubes at the top, but we're making do with the parts we have. So now, next up, I'm going to put this back plate behind the motherboard, which is gonna help us put the CPU cooler on, and then I'm gonna put the motherboard in the case. So I've gotta line up all of these spots. Case, that's actually not too hard. See, this is nice magnetic screwdriver. Pulls onto the screw, pop it in the corner. I wonder if anyone's ever built a PC and it just went perfectly. And our motherboard is now seated. So then our next step here, I've got it all ready to put the CPU cooler on the CPU. Get it on in one go. Leave it there, screw it in. Okay, this is the final major piece, which is the GPU. This is the different one, as you guys have probably seen over the past few years. AMD versus NVIDIA wars raging on as far as discrete GPUs, and then when you see an integrated GPU, it's typically a good Intel one. They're jumping in the game of discrete GPUs, and this is the ARC A770. It's gonna feel somewhere in the range of an RTX 3060 or 3060 Ti maybe. You can see the fans on the outside, it's matte black. It's kind of a pretty simple looking card if you ask me. And I'm gonna be putting it right in this top PCI slot here. And this is the RGB controller cable, so I do have some pins to get this guy to light up. Oh, is that the light right there? Probably, there you go. Oh, all the way around, nice. And it's a dual slot card, so I'm gonna need to take the top 2 out. That should do it. So now I gotta line these up and listen for the click. Yep. I like that. There's a lot of matte black going on in this build, and it speaks to me, and I'm very happy with that. Gotta plug it in. In fact, we gotta do a whole bunch of cable management and cable plugging in. Nobody really wants to watch me do that, so with the magic of video editing, let's fast forward a couple hours. All right, here we are. As you can see, this is the finished build, and spoiler, yeah, I did go a little bit beyond that, plugged some things in, booted it up for the first time, and got everything working, but I am happy to say the PC works. It's alive. I do want to deliver those last few peels that I promised. I'm pretty proud of the way the red and black aesthetic turned out. So here we are now that it's fully booted. I feel like I learned a lot, both about building a PC today in 2022 with all the new and interesting parts that we have here, how clean we're able to make it look. Obviously, having the M.2 SSDs in here keeps it looking particularly sparse. There's lots of clean, open spaces, airflow moving through here. But also just remembering back in the other PCs that I built, which were for very different purposes. The Hackintosh was very much a hack. Like, one of the things I remember about it was we literally couldn't turn it off or it might not turn back on again. Like that type of thing. This is just an all-around, high-end, fun, great daily driver. Matter of fact, we got Forza on here already. All right, in the controls, I can change video settings to 1440p and on high at 144 FPS. That should look pretty good. And now we're way up at 90 to 100 FPS. So you guys might remember we tried some of this crazy Forza demo on 8K on that machine, on the super high-end main gear. This, even at 1440p on high settings, which looks incredible, I'm pretty much locked at upper 80s, lower 90s FPS. Suffice to say, this Intel card can definitely handle some pretty solid gaming. So this is the screwdriver I will be giving away. This exact one, it's one of one in this red and black colorway. I will leave all the bits in it. This is the exact bit I just used to finish this build, and all you have to do is check the description and that could be yours. That's been my first PC build in a really long time, and I'm glad I did it. Thanks, Linus. Thanks y'all for watching. Now I'm gonna get back to gaming. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
Rumbo, Bravo, Tláhuac, Quetzal, Ayuno, Rata, Vehemente, Boscoso.
In the next lesson, we'll look at the top 5 pronunciation mistakes Spanish learners make. You'll want to make sure not to fall into these common traps. After that, we'll begin going through the vowels and consonants of Spanish. This is your chance to learn how to correctly say all of the words you just heard. We'll finish up the series by covering some special topics that will really make your Spanish sound natural. To close this lesson, here's a question for you. Why is it important to spend time on learning proper pronunciation, even if you're already an advanced speaker? The answer, you will be understood, and this will help you build more confidence as you communicate in Spanish. For beginners, you're creating a strong foundation to build on. And for more advanced students, this is your chance to improve your accent and lose any bad habits you may have picked up. What is the hardest part of Spanish pronunciation? Tell us about it in the comments. In this lesson, you'll learn the top 5 Spanish pronunciation mistakes to avoid. These are common mistakes that students of Spanish tend to make, so pay close attention and make sure that you don't make these same mistakes too. Are you ready? Then let's get started. Number 1. Pronouncing the letter H. The letter H is silent in Spanish. Most people learning Spanish try to pronounce it when in fact it should be silent. English speakers in particular are used to pronouncing it in their own language, so they try to do so in Spanish as well. But don't make this same mistake. Take hello, for example.
Hola,
Notice that Alex does not pronounce the H sound.
hola,
Let's move on to number 2.
ñe,
Many Spanish learners tend to pronounce this consonant incorrectly. Listen to Alex pronounce this consonant in a few words.
niño, niña, baño.
This letter can be difficult for students of Spanish to pronounce, mostly because they don't have this sound in their language. One trick to pronouncing this sound is by saying the word onion or canyon. It kind of sounds like a combination between an N and a Y sound, doesn't it? But don't worry about much of the specifics for now, as we'll break down this consonant in Lesson 7. Number 3. Mispronouncing the letter J. The letter J sounds a bit like an H sound in English. This is confusing for many speakers, particularly if their language also uses the Roman letters H and J. But not only this, because if you listen very carefully, it's not the same sound as the H in the English word how, for example. Listen to Alex again. It's pronounced further back, close to the throat. In fact, you should feel a little tickle in the back of the throat. This sound is also pronounced with a bit more force. Listen to Alex pronounce this letter in a few words.
Jamón, eje, reloj.
Number 4, pronouncing Spanish vowels. When pronouncing vowels in Spanish, many speakers tend to stretch out the vowels for too long. Spanish vowels should be pronounced short and simple. Listen to Alex.
A, E, I, O, U.
Now listen to Alex pronounce these vowels in a few words. Pay close attention to the duration of the vowel in each word.
Amigo, enero, ir, oro, uva.
And finally, number 5, mispronouncing the double L sound.
Y.
Double L's are not pronounced the same as the English L sound. Many Spanish learners tend to pronounce it as such or try to extend the sound to compensate. However, the actual sound is quite different. Listen to it again.
Y.
It sounds like a combination of an L and a Y sound. Now, let's listen to how Alex pronounces this sound in a few words.
Llamar, llave, pollo.
We'll break down this sound in Lesson 6. Now you know the top 5 Spanish pronunciation mistakes to avoid. Try to be careful so that you don't make these same mistakes. In the next lesson, we'll start learning vowel sounds in Spanish. What's your biggest challenge with Spanish pronunciation? Is it one of these top 5 mistakes? Let us know in the comments. Stick with us and you'll overcome it quickly. See you in the next Ultimate Spanish Pronunciation Guide lesson. In this lesson, you'll learn all 5 Spanish vowel sounds.
A, E, I, O, U.
With these sounds, you can pronounce any vowel that could possibly appear in Spanish. Are you ready? Then let's get started. The first vowel is
A, rata, rana, azahar.
This is similar to the A sound in the word spa, but there is one subtle difference. Try to relieve the pressure from the back of the throat a little.
A, A, A.
The next vowel is
E, bebé, escalón, vehemente.
This is similar to the E sound in the word let.
E, E. E, E.
The next vowel is
I, dimitir, mío, tipo.
It's identical to the double E sound in the word see.
I.
The next vowel is
O, boscoso, oso, todo.
This is similar to the O sound in the word boring.
O, O. O, O.
And the last vowel is
U, dúo, cucurucho, curable.
It's identical to the double O sound in the word boot.
U, U. U, U.
Did you notice how in all of the examples, Alex said the vowels short and simply? This is how you should do it too. Many Spanish learners tend to stretch out the vowel sounds longer than needed. Try not to do this. Now let's move on to the next topic. A diphthong refers to 2 vowel sounds that are pronounced within the same syllable. You can kind of think of it like gliding from one vowel to the next very quickly. English has diphthongs as well. Take the word loin, for example. It's not pronounced lo-in, but loin. Notice how the O transitions into the I very quickly. It's almost like you're trying to merge the two sounds. Loin. Notice the difference? Okay, now let's listen to a few examples in Spanish.
Gracias. Gracias. Hierba. Hierba. Agua. Agua. Encuentro. Encuentro. Causa. Causa. Neutro. Neutro. Aire. Aire. Trapezoide. Trapezoide.
Okay, I think you got the hang of it. Most vowel sound pairings are diphthongs in Spanish. However, sometimes they're pronounced individually. Listen to the following examples.
Tía. País. Mío. Río.
Words that are pronounced separately are marked with a rising accent from left to right. We'll cover more about accentuation in Lesson 8, but that's all for vowels. Well done! You've just learned all 5 vowel sounds in Spanish. With these sounds, you can properly pronounce any vowel that could possibly appear in the Spanish language. Isn't that great? In the next lesson, you'll start learning consonant sounds. Which diphthong is the most difficult to pronounce for you? Let us know in the comments. See you in the next Ultimate Spanish Pronunciation Guide. lesson.
Hi everyone, I'm Rosa. How are your Spanish listening skills? In this video, you'll have a chance to test them out with a quiz. First, you'll see an image and hear the question in Spanish. Next comes a short dialogue. Listen carefully and see if you can answer correctly. We'll show you the answer at the end. Are you ready?
Una mujer le está preguntando algo a un empleado en la librería. ¿Qué libro quería ver la mujer? Disculpe, me gustaría echarle un vistazo al libro en ese estante.
¿Qué libro quiere usted?
El libro sobre carros.
Espere un momento, por favor. ¿Este?
Exactamente.
Aquí tiene.
¿Qué libro quería ver la mujer? Una mujer le está preguntando algo a un empleado en la librería. ¿Qué libro quería ver la mujer? Disculpe, me gustaría echarle un vistazo al libro en ese estante.
¿Qué libro quiere usted?
El libro sobre carros.
Espere un momento, por favor. ¿Este?
Exactamente.
Aquí tiene.
Un hombre y una mujer están viendo el menú en un restaurante. ¿Qué ordenó el hombre?
¿Qué te gustaría ordenar?
Esta pizza se ve deliciosa. La ordenaré.
Yo comí pizza ayer, así que
Ay, entonces, ¿cómo ves esta hamburguesa?
suena bien. La ordenaré.
¿Qué ordenó el hombre? Un hombre y una mujer están viendo el menú en un restaurante. ¿Qué ordenó el hombre?
¿Qué te gustaría ordenar?
Esta pizza se ve deliciosa. La ordenaré.
Yo comí pizza ayer, así que
Ay, entonces, ¿cómo ves esta hamburguesa?
suena bien. La ordenaré.
Un hombre le está hablando exactamente.
Aquí tiene.
¿Qué libro quería ver la mujer? Una mujer le está preguntando algo a un empleado en la librería. ¿Qué libro quería ver la mujer? Disculpe, me gustaría echarle un vistazo al libro en ese estante.
¿Qué libro quiere usted?
El libro sobre carros.
Espere un momento, por favor. ¿Este?
Exactamente.
Aquí tiene.
Un hombre y una mujer están viendo el menú en un restaurante. ¿Qué ordenó el hombre?
¿Qué te gustaría ordenar?
Esta pizza se ve deliciosa. La ordenaré.
Yo comí pizza ayer, así que
Ay, entonces, ¿cómo ves esta hamburguesa?
suena bien. La ordenaré.
¿Qué ordenó el hombre? Un hombre y una mujer están viendo el menú en un restaurante.
Times. Most people are not going to, but just knowing that it has such a short, low life cycle in terms of connections, that's kind of scary. You've got NVIDIA that was actually testing the ATX 3.0 power supply, saying that on the power supply plug side is where they were seeing the melting. And so all this information is being reported back to PCIe SIG, which is actually the body that like designs and does all this stuff. And then on top of that, you've got the issue of dealing with not just the life cycle of the adapter, but the adapter itself no longer doesn't communicate with an ATX 2.0 power supply with a 440 series card, no longer being able to be smart on how much power it's available to it. So my recommendation here is going to be if you are going to be going out and buying a new 4080 12 gig and 4080 16 gig, this is probably not going to be a problem because they're going to be drawing roughly the same amount of power as probably a 3090 Ti or 3090. If you're going to be buying a 4090, I highly, highly, highly recommend you go out and get a proper high wattage, 1000 to 1200 watt ATX 3.0 power supply with the proper plug, and then don't put too much torque or bend it on the power supply side. Because do you know why this is coming up? People go, why would you be bending your plug? What's the first thing we do when we cable manage? We just like zip tie it up and then we shove it down in like the bottom of the case or something. And I'm telling you right now, I've had my pins coming out of the power supply like this, just cranked over to make it fit and just out of the way. That alone could be enough to cause the problem on day one. This is what you get when you adopt the latest and greatest, when you're in this overlap period of stuff that has to be compatible with new stuff, but it wasn't designed for the new stuff. And I say that too, just because of the fact that the power supply output design may not be like designed to, because here's the thing, they have a ton of PCI Express power plugs coming out of them, but they're on the 2.0 power supplies. Let's say you have a 1200 watt and it comes with 4 8-pin PCI Express with pigtails on them. Those were never intended to all go into like one graphics card. They were intended to go into like either an SLI setup where each graphics card was pulling back when they were designed like 250 watts max, or having one power supply and then maybe a PCI Express supplemental power to the motherboard, or you've got a RAID card or something that might use a PCI Express or some sort of supplemental power thing in there that would use a 6-pin. And it was designed for that sort of thing. But it wasn't designed to have a single graphics card spiking 600 watts plus if you start to overclock this thing at all, and then have it all draw from one rail, or the rail design just be poor, and then all the shortcomings start to show. Because what we are dealing with right now is quite literally the limit of a single device being able to actually hit the max spec of the power supply's design. And that's why an ATX 3.0 power supply is highly recommended. One of the things I plan on doing, getting the 600 watt ATX 3.0, because that will have the power plug, like with the sideband, and then hook it up to a 4090 and see what happens when we go under load. Like monitor the graphics card. We're gonna have to do this sort of testing. It gives us a lot of stuff to talk about, which is actually fun content creator wise. It's just, man, is just buying a 4090 and putting it in your system right now is a lot more complicated than you might have thought it was even just a few days ago. All right, guys, there you go. I'll put some links down in the articles below, including Steve's video if you guys want a deep dive on this, because I think it's important to talk about, especially for buyer beware. I'm not saying don't buy a 40 series card. That's up to you to decide if you want to buy one or not. It's just make sure you're ready for it. God forbid you put it with like a Threadripper or something like that that can pull a crap ton of wattage. You might see fireworks before New Year's if you do that.
This here is another viewer's broken gaming PC, but it's not broken in the traditional sense. Well, I suppose it could be. It's possible something could be broken outright, but the this is that it does power on, it does post, but it does not load into Windows, which pretty much means this thing's just as valuable as a box of rocks. We're gonna try to fix it up. I think it has to do with either his storage drive or a setting in the BIOS. I'm expecting this to be a pretty quick fix, but you never know. So we'll see what happens. Are you ready? Stay with me. Introducing Kioxia's new XG8 series NVMe SSDs featuring 5th generation BiCS Flash 3D TLC memory and PCIe 4.0 compatibility. With capacities up to 4 terabytes and support for optional security features like TCG Pyrite and Opal, Kioxia drives are perfect for your next desktop, server, or workstation. Sequential reads and writes reach up to 7,000 and 5,800 megabytes per second respectively and are suited for ultra-fast program, OS, and VM load times, bundled with peace of mind warranties and at affordable price points. Kioxia's comprehensive PCIe 4 SSD portfolio continues to grow, with products offered for a wide range of applications. Check them out, including their new XG8 drives, by clicking the link below. So, like I said, this rig is, well, it's pretty clean looking. It looks like it was put together well, and it is quite beefy as well. A Radeon RX 6700 XT in here, obviously an AM4 CPU, some sort, maybe Ryzen 5, Ryzen 7, 4 DDR4 DIMMs, and questionably enough, a fan placed kind of sketchily on the basement facing downward. I just checked the power supply fan is also pulling air down. It's not flipped upside down to where it's pulling in air from the bottom. So you have two fans essentially doing the exact same thing, pressed right up against each other, competing for air with the graphics card, which is trying to pull air in the other direction and out the rear and sides. I don't know about this. I might advise him remove this and just, he'll be okay without it. I think the power supply will be fine. But everything else looks decent. Again, with that one exception, that being the fact that he can't get into Windows. And if he can't get into Windows, he can't use his rig. So that's what we're gonna try to figure out here. Now, for those who are new here, this playlist is called Fix or Flop. In it, we attempt to fix, that's the key word there, attempt, okay? Some folks think like I'm guaranteeing fixes, and that's not the case. That's literally why we call it Fix or Flop. Use your noggins, come on. Yeah, some of the comments, I just don't get the criticism. Anyway, we attempt to fix viewer systems for free. We charge nothing for the service. I can monetize these videos. That's how I make my money. I'm obviously not doing this as like a charity. I'm not doing it out of the kindness of my heart. In one sense of the word, I kind of am, but at the same time, I'm also getting paid to do this, so it's not like I'm all that nice a guy. Anyway, the least I could do for allowing you to, or for allowing me to make videos around your builds is attempt to fix them. So if you do live in or around Orlando, Florida, just local central Florida area, and you have a system that maybe doesn't power on, or it powers on but doesn't post, something along those lines, probably a hardware related issue, I would love a chance to fix it, and you can enter your rig to possibly be featured on the channel via the submission link below. First thing we need to do is power the system on, and hopefully we'll see what the viewer says we should see. So it does turn on. It's emitting a very interesting smell. And there's our post. And it's loading. This looks like it's working. Uh-oh. Preparing automatic, so it goes straight into repairing automatic repair. It looked like for a second there, and I'll get a close-up here of the screen, the system was going to load into Windows. I mean, you had the little spinny wheels at the bottom. That's what you see right before loading in. But at this point, it looks like the system just continues to reset itself. Once it tries loading into that boot volume, it just craps its pants and starts power cycling, which is odd. But I think this has a lot to do with the drive itself. I'm gonna hop into the BIOS real quick. He said that he reset his BIOS settings multiple times, so I don't expect there's anything in there that's keeping the boot volume from being loaded into, but we should double check just to be safe. And for those wondering, debug LEDs all flash through appropriately. You can see the green boot LED there, so that means all the primary system checks have passed. Now we are able to make it into the BIOS, so that's a good thing. And let's see, boot here, boot option 1. So this is the Gigabyte M.2. I believe this is the top one that it's a Gen 4 drive that he's loaded Windows onto from what he's told me. And so that's good news. At least the drive is detected in the BIOS. it doesn't look like anything else about this UEFI is off. Everything seems normal, settings seem legit. So, I mean, the fact that it's detecting the drive and trying to boot into it, I don't think there's anything else we can do here in the BIOS to get around whatever's corrupt. This is the Gigabyte drive right here with the copper heatsink over it. It looks like it's connected to the correct M.2 slot, closest to the CPU to utilize CPU lanes. And right now I'm wondering if I should just swap the drive out completely to see if the system posts. I mean, right now, the fact that we're in the BIOS tells me that all of the other primary components are okay. You're not utilizing a boot drive, any storage drive at all to get into the BIOS. You're using the onboard BIOS chip. And so that's why everything seems okay now, why we can navigate through the panels no problem. There is no freezing. But the moment it tries to access the storage drive, the boot drive in particular, that's when things completely go out of whack. So I have an M.2 with an AMD OS already preloaded. Well, it's Windows, but it's Windows configured for AMD systems, AMD drivers. And I'm going to swap that in here just to ensure that we can boot into it. And I've already asked the viewer if anything sensitive is on this drive. He said no, just games, nothing important. We'll probably end up, actually I think most of his games aren't even on there. He's got a few other storage drives that have his games on it. So just the OS, what we might need to do is just reinstall Windows. It might be a corrupt OS. If at that point we still run into issues trying to install it or trying to access it after the fact, then the drive is probably cooked. And swapping it out will be the easiest way to get around this. Luckily, these M.2s are super easy to remove and install. Wow, this thing is beefy. It is literally solid copper, it feels like. Holy cow. I love that. And we'll get this one in